I didn't notice the quiet at first. It came in small pockets. In the car, after conversations ended early. In the kitchen, when I stopped rehearsing explanations that would never be asked for. There was a stretch of weeks where nothing dramatic happened. And that was the strange part. No blow-ups, no confrontations, just less noise in my head. I remember standing in line somewhere ordinary, holding a cup of coffee I didn't really want, and realizing my shoulders were down. That almost never happened. They'd been living near my ears for years. It wasn't relief exactly. More like absence. Like something that had always been buzzing finally ran out of battery. I didn't celebrate it. I didn't name it. I just stood there and waited for the familiar tension to return. It didn't. I'm in my 40s now, and most of my life looks stable from the outside. Long-term relationships. Work people recognize me for. A calendar that fills whether I want it to or not. I've been called thoughtful, careful, good at listening. What people didn't see was how much of my attention was spent tracking their reactions. Tiny shifts in tone, pauses that lasted half a beat too long, the way someone's eyes would drift when I spoke. I told myself it was empathy, being attuned, being present. But I was always adjusting, softening sentences, adding context no one asked for, clarifying things that hadn't been misunderstood yet. Conversations felt like performances with no script, just constant improvisation. I'd leave dinners exhausted, replaying moments that were probably already forgotten by everyone else. At work, I'd send follow-up messages explaining why I'd phrased something the way I did. With friends, I'd circle back days later to make sure everything landed okay. In relationships, I'd over-communicate until even I was tired of hearing myself talk. I thought this was what caring looked like. Staying available, staying open, making sure no one walked away with the wrong version of me. It didn't feel like a problem. It felt like maintenance. The cost didn't announce itself. It accumulated. I was always a little tense, always a little behind myself. Like I was living half a step to the left of where I actually stood. I'd agree to things I didn't want because explaining why I didn't want them felt heavier than just going along. I'd apologize for moods I hadn't even expressed yet. I'd take responsibility for silences that didn't belong to me. There were mornings I woke up already tired, not from lack of sleep, but from anticipating conversations that hadn't happened. I carried entire dialogues in my body, jaw tight, stomach braced. And the strange thing was how invisible it all looked. People around me felt supported, understood, at ease. I was the calm one, the reasonable one, the one who could talk things through. But somewhere in that role, I disappeared a little. Not all at once, just enough that I stopped noticing when my own reactions arrived late, muted, or not at all. I didn't feel angry when something crossed a line. I felt confused, like I'd missed a cue. I didn't feel hurt when something stung. I felt the urge to explain why it probably wasn't meant that way. My inner life became a translation service, from me to them. Never the other way around? The recognition didn't come during a fight or a breakup. It came during something smaller, almost embarrassing. Someone misunderstood me. Not dramatically, just slightly. They responded to something I hadn't actually said. And before I could stop myself, I felt that familiar surge. The need to correct, to clarify, to make sure they really saw what I meant. I opened my mouth, and then nothing came out. Not because I was calm, because I was tired. The thought of explaining myself again felt heavier than the misunderstanding itself, heavier than being seen inaccurately for a moment. So I let it sit there, the wrong impression, between us. My heart sped up, my hands went cold. I waited for the damage. It didn't arrive. The conversation moved on. The relationship didn't fracture. The world didn't tilt. Later that night, the discomfort lingered. Not guilt, something closer to grief. I realized how much of my identity had been built around being understood, or at least trying to be. I had mistaken clarity for safety and safety for connection. The shift wasn't a decision I announced to myself. It was more like a quiet refusal that kept repeating. The next time someone projected something onto me, I noticed the urge rise, the tightening, the internal scramble, and I didn't act on it. Not out of strength, out of restraint that felt almost clumsy. There were moments I wanted to jump in and clean things up. Moments where silence felt like negligence, like I was failing at being decent. But I stayed with the unease. Let people sit with their interpretations. Let conversations end without resolution. It cost me. Some people drifted, a few became cooler, more distant. One relationship didn't survive the absence of my constant clarification, and I didn't chase them. That part surprised me. I had expected panic. Instead, there was a slow settling in my body, like I was finally standing where my feet were. I spoke less, not because I had nothing to say, because I no longer felt responsible for how it landed. I answered questions when they were asked. I didn't preempt confusion. I didn't manage emotions that weren't voiced. The relief showed up physically first. I slept deeper, my jaw unclenched. Then relationally, the people who stayed began meeting me differently. Not better, differently. There was more space, more pauses, sometimes awkward ones. And in that space, I felt myself again. Not polished, not always likable, but present. I still get misunderstood. Probably more than before. I still feel the old reflex sometimes, especially with people I care about deeply. It hasn't vanished. What changed is that I don't obey it automatically. I don't sacrifice my inner position to preserve external harmony. The cost is real. I am less universally liked. Some doors closed quietly, but the leak stopped. I no longer leave conversations carrying other people's perceptions like unpaid debts. I come home to myself with energy left. It worked. For me. And it took longer than it should have. If this story crossed something you recognize, maybe it's enough to stay for a bit. I write and speak like this from experience, not conclusions. If you want, subscribe. And if something stayed with you, leave a comment. I read them, sometimes in silence.